welcome to this week's episode of Picking and Putting. There's my picking and putting swag. That's the only swag I got in one cup. We want to welcome today our guest author and renowned athlete, teacher, mentor, educator, you name it, John Yeager from Culver, Indiana. Hey, John, how are you, man?
I'm great, Rick. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, we're loving it. We're loving it. And along with Liberty Bill from his Attic Studios in South Charlotte, North Carolina, we're welcome Bill, who's a native Chicagoan. So the two of them got a lot to talk out. Well, starting out, John's got his his background's extensive. He's an educator. He's a doctor of education from Boston University. He got his master's in psychology at Penn. He's been in Northern Indiana and Culver for about 21 years, and we'll get into all that. But John, just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got there and everything about what you're writing and everything.
Well, thanks, Rick. You know, part of my journey, I remember very vividly when I was 11 years old, and there was a road race on July 4th, and I had done some running, so I decided to take part in it. And I got to the race site, and I saw that everybody else was at least 6 or 7 years older than me. And I could just feel my hands go cold and clammy. And, I really needed a sports psychologist at that time. And I just was kind of freaking out and didn't know what to do. I mean, this is I was in a woman's game there. And I looked over at my father, who just smiled at me. And that smile said everything. He said, that smile said, John, you can race or you don't have to. It's your call. So I decided to do courage over confidence, got on the starting line, the gun went off, and I finished dead last, and the parade almost caught up to me, but one of the things that I saw that really, I remember that I saw within my father was his ability to provide me with hope and optimism for that. And since then, in all my sporting endeavors as an athlete, a coach, and a coach of coaches, I've really helped to use that in the work that I do. And the same thing too is the notion of story, remembering that story at 11 years old, what are the coach's main stories that come out there? And one of the other, so that got me involved a lot and in competitive sport. And I was very, lucky to play college lacrosse, and I was a goalie. So some people would call goalies courageous. Other people would call them stupid. Anyways, we're playing our first game of my senior year, even though it's my, not sure if it's my last year it's my last year of eligibility, but not necessarily of classes that I was taking. So anyways, our field was located 3 miles from our campus in Boston. Our campus was near Fenway Park where the Red Sox play. Our home field was in back of Harvard Stadium in Allston, Brighton. So our field was glass, grass, and dirt. And we were separated by chain link fence to the pristine fields of Harvard, even though we could see Harvard Stadium every day. So that was pretty cool. So we played Bowdoin our first game, and I played absolutely awful. I mean, terrible. I wish the coaches could have taken me out, but it wasn't to be. So I grieved for several days. And then fortunately there was redemption on that following Thursday. We played Middlebury College from Vermont. They had come down, and, we're a bunch of ragtag hippies. My hair is brown down to my shoulders, parted in the middle, headband, peace sign. Okay.
I was there.
You remember that, Rick?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. And so anyways, and one of the players on our team, Ronnie and Jemmy, shaved half his beard off to pump us up for the game. So we were a very bunch of eclectic guys compared to the really systematic and clean cut Middlebury players, and especially their coach, who looked like he was ex-military, had a high and tight haircut. So first 2 shots of the game go in on me, and I'm saying, oh no, and from a sports psych standpoint, the drunken monkey in our head that just goes around there and says, you really don't have it. You're an imposter. That was kind of running through me at that time. Then fortunately I made a save, cleared it out. We scored a goal. We scored the second. Ball became like a beach ball to me. I made the next 30 saves. We win the game 6-2. But that's not why I tell the story, because it's the juxtaposition is that in the second period, Rob Pfeiffer, the head coach of Middlebury, called a timeout, and the Middlebury players ran dutifully to their bench, and the Boston State players to their bench. And remember, Ronnie runs to their bench. There is something wrong with Ronnie. Goes through their huddle, jumps on the coach's back of the other team. Okay. And the Middlebury players don't know what to do. They're dumbfounded. So he comes off the back. Coach Pfeiffer turns around. Ronnie takes off his helmet, still half a beard. They look up at each other, and they both begin to smile and then cry and embrace each other.
Wow.
We're saying, what's going on here? Well, the backstory. When Ronnie heard the voice, the last time he had heard that inflection and tone of that voice, which was Pfeiffer's, was 6 years before in the jungles of Vietnam,
Wow.
because Pfeiffer was his platoon commander. Longest timeout of all time, greatest timeout of all time. And what it has is resonated with me about the collaborative aspects of sport. That when one team goes against another team, there is this connection there that's really powerful. We saw it in the semifinal game between Gonzaga and UCLA. We saw it in the finals for the women's NCAA basketball with Arizona and Stanford.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, when we step over that line to compete, we're not sure how it's going to turn out, but we also hope it turns out in a way that helps to make us complete. And the work that I've done as a coach in coaching other coaches and teams since then has been to really focus on that area, to bring out the best in athletes and coaches, and to help them to understand the why of what they do, so they can really allow for their purpose to come to fore.
Well, when I read that story in your book, I had that noted down here. That was going to be my prime question, because that is such a moving story, and brings tears to your eyes, at least for my generation. And I just thought, boy, that's a good one for every talk you ever give. You give that talk, and I'm sure you have. I was thinking here as you were talking, I said I should introduce you as the Jim Brown of Boston. Only, remember, he was a great lacrosse player at Syracuse.
Syracuse, yes, certainly.
Probably a little bigger than you.
Yes, a lot bigger than me.
Yeah, a lot bigger than you. Yeah, I thought that storyline was wonderful. So as you go forward with who are you speaking to more now? Are you speaking to other coaches to mentor them, or are you speaking corporate to? Because I can see where you can do this for businesses too.
Well, I've in last year it's been very interesting with COVID, with doing everything remotely. But working with management teams in business, okay, and also working with coaches individually, and working with collective teams too at the high school and in college levels, and really working with them, trying to do some of my work remotely with them, which has been a great challenge, okay, to do, just because the healthiness of the face-by-face interaction is so powerful. But this is the next best thing, so you go with it.
Right.
So I found myself doing that and actually helping, coach managers and leaders in business, in education, and on the, in the athletic field, to really, how do they bring out the best in their leadership during, COVID? How do they do that? And with a strong sense of self-awareness, their capacity to lead and empower others, and their ability to kind of choreograph the team dance of the teams that they are, that they're working with there. So that's where I find, most of my work there.
Yeah. And John, flipping over to your book, The Coaching Zone here, you kick it off with coach self-management, right?
That's right.
And talking about self-awareness. Now, anecdotally, my observation as an adult coming into society is there's a severe shortage of self-awareness out here in society, especially at the highly successful leadership level. So I'm curious what you've noticed when you've interacted with coaches and over time, what you're seeing as it relates to self-awareness.
Well, the 50 interviews that I had with coaches and with sports psychologists, I was preaching to the choir there that these coaches had, developed a level of self-awareness and a sense of a growth mindset, that failure is growth, and that they're lifelong learners, that we're continually evolving. And I found that, and then I've also found that when I've worked with leaders, whether they're in business, education, or in sports, it's, my engagements with them tend to happen more if they're open to look at their own self-awareness. And I end up finding that I don't get the gigs where the coaches say, that's not territory we're going to trot on there. And so I'm at the point in my life where I can pick and choose,
Right.
with my clients, and I really want for coaches to be able to see how they can continue to grow, and growing through one, their strengths. What are their strengths? What are their shortcomings? Okay. And what is the why? Why do they coach? What do they want from coaching? What do they want from their athletes or their teams in business? What do they want for their athletes? And John Kuna, who does a lot of work with that, he's my co-author of the book. And looking at purpose development, these are really important questions to ask coaches, to see, where they are. So when they come to deal with their teams or individual athletes, what's coming out of their mouth? What are the stories that they tell? Okay, that have been really important to them. And as they act, that many ways, coaches are not supposed to be the main actors in the dance. Okay, it's the athlete. And so how can coaches become even greater servant leaders, even though there might be some command control that they have to use? Okay, but how can they orchestrate and choreograph individual athletes in their teams, and how do they hit the sweet spot between working with the individual athlete and then balancing that with the team? Because there is an I in team, there is that individual, and you need to, reconcile that, but how does that individual fit the jigsaw of the team?
What do you think? How has it changed in your experience through the years? I remember reading you talked about Coach Kelly, which at Notre Dame, which was a direct reflection of what we just saw. I'm a North Carolina grad, and we just saw it with Roy Williams. And he still loves the interaction, the day-to-day coaching, teaching in the gym. But the part of interacting with the next generation of kids, who there's a little bit more of instant gratification, whatever you want to say. Sorry, Bill, but whatever.
I would call it empowerment, but
well, okay. But how have you seen that evolve, and how would you coach a young coach today, or an older coach maybe, dealing with today's youth?
Well, yeah, there is. I mean, the importance is that one is that the coach has a growth mindset, and I think Brian Kelly at Notre Dame certainly has that. He talks about how athletes can bounce back from adversity, but he really works at trying to get them to also bounce forward, to make healthy shifts, to grow from that and move forward. One of the things that I would suggest to coaches is to be, one is to develop, really the importance of developing and cultivating connections with the athlete, building a level of vulnerability trust. And that's based on Patrick Lencioni and his work on 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And vulnerability trust is all about coaches and leaders being honest with themselves, even if they screw up, but to allow for the athlete to understand that also. So when the athlete screws up, they're not looking over their shoulder. Okay. Developing a sense of empathy for the athletes. Okay. But really understanding an athlete's perspective. sometimes young coaches who may have just come out of their own playing careers are still in it.
Mm.
Okay, we sometimes see that there isn't a lot of what we call a hot cold empathy gap, which means that the coach may see, well, this is what it was like when I was 14. Okay, they don't necessarily see that. They see that I've been there, I've done that. But what is it like to be a 14-year-old today playing ball? What's it like to be a 20-year-old? Okay, and so coaches can understand that and live in the athlete's skin. And even most importantly is basically for the coach to say, as my father did it with a smile, I am here for you. What do you need from me?
Me, right?
That's critically important. And so I think that's the key in there. And I know Bill had mentioned the term empowerment. I think coaches that can learn through experience to provide direction and to also empower their athletes, but to hit the sweet spot with that, because if you over focus on providing direction to the neglect of empowerment, you become a micromanager, and that doesn't work out so well. But if you empower to the neglect of providing direction, then you've got athletes in chaos, okay? Or everybody's leading the charge there. So I think those are two very important things. And I think the third piece, and I get a lot of this from my friend Neil Anderson, who's the men's lacrosse coach at Norwich University in Vermont, is letting go of control.
Mm.
Giving a certain amount of autonomy to athletes to make their decisions, to fail and to grow. And that can be really challenging at times, where coaches are chomping at the bit, ready to butt in. And are there times they should butt in? Of course there are. But it's really important that they present a autonomy supportive environment to allow for the athletes to actually grow. And what a service a coach does to an athlete when that happens, because the athlete then takes so much more out of that when he or she graduates and moves on and uses this as a life skill in daily life down the road.
And how important is it for coaches out there, when we think about empowering athletes, to balance kind of the process versus results? Because to me, the focus should be on the process. If you do a solid process 10 out of 10 times, you're going to get good results most of the time. So
Yeah.
how do you balance that with the empowering of athletes, where the focus is more on the process?
Yeah, I think the process is critically important. Now, it gets a little blurry when you get into professional sports.
Yeah,
This process and performance really need to equate to each other. The idea of process goes to this idea of having a mastery orientation, that athletes and coaches who have this mastery orientation, developing skills, developing systems and tactics so that they're most ready to perform really well on game day.
Mhm.
Okay. And as you say, Bill, if they're ready to do that and they've got some talent, there's a good chance that good results are going to happen. Okay. But if it's looked at, just straight, especially at the younger levels of win, or the cliche of win at all cost and stuff like that, and you forget about the process, that really muddies the water and it makes it very, very difficult. And I think it's that process and coaches who have that process, who've developed that culture, within their teams, that they're able to have a strong institutional memory. This is what our team is. This is what we're all about. And we've been around for the last 30 or 40 years. And I think of Lincoln Sudbury boys lacrosse in Massachusetts. The head coach there, Brian Vaughna, I mean, he doesn't necessarily coach the high school program. He runs the whole program from the youth kids all the way up. And they're out doing community service. They're doing all this stuff. Are they one of the top teams in Massachusetts every year? Oh, yes, they are. But it's process. It's process, which is the bottom line that allows them to go there, doing the step-by-step things that matter most in that situation, in those situations.
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about process and we were talking about the masters earlier, and I started thinking about that specific. The ones that always come to mind for me, of course, is golf and putting and you've read about, I can't remember right off the top of my head. I had read some clinical psychology book in the last year about free throw shooting. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why at the youth level, without overburdening a child, why don't we teach those sort of things? Not so much a result, just teach. Of course, we're teaching technical skills, I guess. But I hear about that all the time in golf, like you said, with even down to a caddy. Don't say there's water over there. Say hit it down the left side.
Exactly. Right. So you don't put your attention in that direction.
In that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about teaching those skills from youth? Is that overburdening a young? Just let them play.
I think letting them play is part of a mental skill. Okay. But also in there, inculcating certain types of motor skills that are important for that, but also for coaches to, become in some ways amateur sports psychologists by learning more about the game and fear of failure, and helping and supporting athletes, giving them the appropriate feedback, which is really important. Stone and Heen's book, Thanks for the Feedback, talks about giving them making sure you're giving good appreciative feedback to athletes, so that they're literally not telling them that, oh, rah, great job. You're adding on to that great job, saying, this is why I thought you did such a good job because of this, this, and this. Let's do it again tomorrow. You want to do that? Yeah. Then there's coaching or skill improvement feedback, where you're coaching the athlete up, with something. Okay. And the third piece is evaluation feedback. And that can get muddied, because that's all about, you won 30% of your face-offs out there. What does that mean? Okay. So using the right feedback at the right time for the right reason, of those three things. Coaches can learn to do that, even though some will say, look, I've got 20 to 25 athletes that I'm working with. How am I going to understand each one? Well, you understand what their skill levels are, okay, and what they're doing, their human capital of knowledge and skills out in the playing field. You can learn to understand this a little bit more, okay? And that means sometimes coaches have to get into looking at a couple books, and hopefully they'll take a look at the Coaching Zone to see
for sure
for them there, So I think that's very important. And just as you were saying, Rick, about in the Masters in golf, it's basically focusing not on the water, focusing on where you want the ball to go, and that's really, really important. And if these skills are learned earlier on, that can be really challenging. And one of the challenging things about with the Masters is that, and I was looking at a couple articles in Golf Digest about this, is that, the Masters is basically the only course that is the only home course for the majors in most, every year.
Right.
Yep.
And then there's such a narrative behind the Masters. Just yesterday, watching some practice rounds on TV and having some of the athletes talk about, yeah, but come this morning, right now, when people are teeing off today, is very different than it was yesterday.
Yeah.
In placement's going to be potentially more challenging. The crowds are going to be building, and it's basically how well can you hit the sweet spot between flowing and not trying to control things. So basically, that to try to control Amen Corner in Augusta is not the way to do it. Amen Corner doesn't happen until you get down to these 11th, 12th, and 13th holes. And basically, if golfers tend to look ahead of the game, and really our best golfers out there, are playing one stroke at a time. And if they make a mistake, they have a ritual to get themselves back to kind of moving forward, with what they're going to do next. And, I think about somebody like Jordan Spieth, who won last weekend. Does that put him in pretty good shape from a confidence perspective for this Masters? Sure. Does Dustin Johnson, is he in good shape because he won it in November with the leaves falling? Or is this a totally different course, that he'll be playing, And what about John Rahm? John Rahm just had I believe his first child over the weekend, and
Yep.
he was being interviewed yesterday. He goes, I just spent 5 days having this amazing
Hi.
Arctic life changes for me. I'm not sure where I am and ready for that. He could maybe go out and win it because he's not thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, if how could it be any better? Whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think about? And this is off tangent, I guess, a little bit, but
I have a quick follow-up on all that. So you mentioned developing young habits with the youth. It's John Rahm, obviously, with the new son. So I have a 2.5-year-old son. So I feel like, what would be the best advice for you to give to me? He's going to be into sports. He already loves watching sports. As he's getting into sports, how should I be coaching him? And then second part of that is, how should I be monitoring his coaches and playing out the scenario where somebody's trying to get him to throw a curveball when he's 8 years old, or maybe the other coach is yelling at the umpire and it's a bunch of 12-year-olds and it doesn't matter and we shouldn't be yelling at an umpire. So curious what your thoughts are as I prepare to navigate that.
Great question, Bill. Slippery slope here. I think one of the big things is, I think let them play right now. Just let them play and give a lot of appreciative feedback. And if they screw up on something, yeah, they do, and they eventually learn it. And then when, as youth sports gets younger and younger, I'd be very interested in knowing for youth organizations, what are the core values and mission of the league? And those are questions to ask as parents. You have a right to do that because you are entrusting your child to other supposedly fully functioning, caring adults. Okay. And saying, what's the process like? What's playing time like? What does this all look like there too? Because many times I talk to coaches when they, youth coaches who talk about core values with their team. Also, these coaches expect that the parents of the team parents of their children follow the same core values. So there's something, they're not making a scene on the sideline based on those things too. That only happens when there's a groundswell and a contagion. So I think those things are very, very important because, we see that you've probably heard of this before. We've got, some young athletes who are retiring from competitive sport between the ages of 12 to 14 because they've had so many games so far and they're just getting a little tired of it.
Yep.
And if it's, basically the coach can ask the question, you want to do this again tomorrow? And if the athlete says, yeah, well, they're doing something right there, and then these, we talk about sports specialization, and that's really, even talking to people at the U.S. Olympic Training Center about this, Peter Haberl, who's a senior sports psych guy there, that basically don't specialize too early, play a lot of different sports. Okay. Then you get to a certain point where you might say, wow, I'm really good at this. I could move on with this. Then you can go over into that. Jordan Spieth is a very good basketball player. Okay. And Jim Brown was, a great lacrosse player above and, and a great track star and also a great football player. And I think having these other sport experiences, a lot of transfer in there,
Good stuff.
Yeah. And so but also having year-long seasons, you go when you gotta break that up. You gotta have a break from that. Even if you go to another sport, but the break from that, because after a while that can become overwhelming there too. You always want to keep that level of enjoyment with the athlete.
And wanting a little bit more too, right?
Yeah. Wanting a little bit more as opposed to say, oh, I got to do this today.
I remember, John, I remember my oldest, who's 40 now, and we were doing that, keeping them all sports, ahead of the curve as they are now. And he was about 12, and we were getting him set up to play winter basketball after fall soccer or whatever. And he says, can I take a season off and just come home and play with my friends? And it was a real eye opener. And since that day, I've told these kids and friends, I said, you know, I think you get to middle school and let the child introduce them to everything they can stand, whatever they want to play, let them play.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And then when they get to be 12 or, sixth, seventh grade, and they say, I really like tennis. I like lacrosse. Well then, okay, we'll dive on the sword and take you wherever you want to go to play.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what do you think? This is totally off. What do you think about the explosion of lacrosse? I mean, in the Southeast now, lacrosse, where we live, lacrosse is just booming. I used to think of it more of the Northeast, and like soccer was Washington U. That's not true anymore. Lacrosse and soccer are huge. What do you think brought the explosion of lacrosse?
Yeah, they're huge in the Southeast and huge throughout the country. You look at your top college programs now, and you're getting athletes, student athletes from all around the country.
Yeah.
You're getting them from Carolinas, from Florida, from Georgia, from California. I think one of the things that lacrosse offers is that it's in some ways a hybrid of a variety of different sports.
Yeah.
Okay. It's fast moving. It has aspects of soccer, aspects of basketball, pick and rolls. It's got aspects of hockey in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say hockey.
Yeah, and then you're playing on the size of a football or soccer field, and you're doing that out there. And I think that's where it's a sport that allows anybody of any stature, size-wise, to play with that in the men's game, in the women's game, boys or girls game too. Johns Hopkins years ago had a 5'3" attackman on offense. And then there was a 6'8" or 6'7" other attackman for John Hopkins. And they, you see them standing next to each other. And that can allow, when the rules are, enforced and played appropriately, it'll allow a person who's a, big guy, who's a defenseman in the men's game, to a gazelle midfielder who's running down there, and to a nifty, agile attackman down the other end. And then if you look at forwards, midfielders, defense, and goalies for the women's game, same thing, that you've got this capacity to move the ball around, and like in developing a skill of throwing and catching. And there's a process called wall ball, and that's huge. And that's what you do is you get the ball and you throw it against a wall. And I played wall ball I didn't start to playing lacrosse till my junior year in high school, but I broke windows in the house. Okay. And in the garage door. But if you go off a brick wall, back and forth, and you get to learn that skill. And then you go out there and you get that team concept that works in there. And I think that's really helped with the growth of that today.
Yeah. So John, I got to ask you, this is a little bit off topic, but with all your relationships in the NCAA, there's obviously a lot of controversy right now. They got Congress looking at them. They've got multiple states filing legislation. We just had the big admissions scandal where the Yale soccer coach was getting bribed, those massive donations to the Stanford sailing team. For me, being candid with you, John, for about 15 years, I've been on abolish the NCAA train. I just think we need to take the semi-professional sports, bring the money out of the darkness, compensate the athletes fairly, and then have the rest of it be self-funded like you would with a high school club sport. For example, lacrosse at my high school in Chicago is a club sport. It's self-funded. They deliver mulch throughout the neighborhood. Sure. So I'm curious where you see the NCAA heading and what the future of that looks like.
I don't want to misspeak here. And so I'm going to be very careful as I answer you, Bill.
I appreciate that, John.
Okay. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to take a full stand on either direction. How I do believe that the NCAA, as any other major important organization, needs to understand its institutional memory, but also to understand what needs to happen transformationally, okay, to make sure that athletes are taken care of in the most appropriate way at Division I, Division II, and Division III. And what is that relationship there with the NCAA and pro sports and the NCAA and high school sports? I think that's really important to really begin to look at that and to begin to address this, but to have really strong conversations of these healthy tensions, and trying to hit the sweet spot of that. I think just wonderful. Some really cool things have happened, with the NCAA, with Black Lives Matter, and that's been wonderful.
And not NCAA property. The college basketball players rocking that.
Yeah. So we see that these are things, but I think the NCAA has to continually grow and to go with where, public opinion is starting to go with now,
Makes
so
sense.
that's my political, almost evasive.
I thought that was a good statement. Yeah, they're difficult changing times, and sports reflects all that. Well, I don't know. As we draw to a close here, I want to ask John if give him the floor, let you promote the Coaching Zone. Tell us your mantra for coaches, and how to get a hold of you, and how they can contact you, and where to buy the book, and we'll give you the floor.
Well, thanks, Rick. I just appreciate being on and having these conversations with both you and Bill today. Well, here's the actual copy of it. And today's a very, very exciting day. And I appreciate you having me on, because it's our official launch date.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was a 5-year process that I undertook along with my co-author, John Kuna, to really take a differentiated view of coaching, and really begin to look at, coaching self-management as a very important tool that leads to leading and empowering athletes, and to, choreographing the team dance. And that's how the book is divided into those 3 different parts, and so, with the book, it's available on Amazon. And today, the price for the Kindle version is $1.99 as launch day special. I'm shamelessly promoting it. And
please do.
Yeah. And then I'm actually running a webinar tonight for coaches of, 5 insider tips to bringing out the best in their athletes. And I'll send you off the kind of a link to that if you want to, send that out to your social media to see if anybody wants to do an 11th hour sign up for that. As I said, the book is available on Amazon, and I can be reached at john@yeagerleadership.com. That's YEAGER leadership.com. The website to the book is www.thecoachingzonebook.com, thecoachingzonebook.com. And you can reach me through that because of some of the other services that Yeager Leadership does, working with team captains. That's the new book. That's going to be the next book on team captains, and then also working with teams. Just really, really excited about it, and really want to just spread the word out there to get coaches to understand even in greater ways how important they are, that the children are listening, and all athletes are listening in there. And, it reminds me of that, one of the goals in coaching, in athletes is that every time you step over the line, and to be a part of the game, the athlete, coach, or fan, or, you're not sure exactly what's going to happen. And then in many ways, having great sports experiences allow for us to feel complete. And I really feel that's something that, as more and more coaches really kind of understand that even more so, then we can have more joy and satisfaction, and even greater performances that we see out there.
Well, I can vouch. I read this, and I can vouch that I'm not a coach, but I would say to every coach out there, you'll enjoy it to no end. I think anybody in any leadership in business should read it.
And parents.
It
has has parent implications. Somebody had written that in one of the reviews on Amazon for it. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I mean, there was a discussion. I won't go into details, but the polarity and kind of like everything is so one end and the other nowadays. And when I read that, I said, boy, that's the way to bring back mediation or back discussion, allow people to hear both sides of the story and actually use these things rather than this thing,
Exactly.
For you people out there was listening rather than talking. You can't see me unless you're on YouTube. But well, John, we really enjoyed it. I love the book. I'm going to promote the hell out of it, and I wish you the best of luck in your next endeavor. I hope we get to see you again. I'll always look for you now and read anything.
Yeah, we got to catch up with John.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'd love a couple months down the road to catch up again and chat about how the book's going and some new ideas of talking about, team leaders on teams.
Yeah, I would love to.
I really appreciate obviously, thanks for coming on, John, but I really appreciate what you're doing as someone, again, with a young son, for coaching and changing and elevating the purpose of it. Just really appreciate all the work you're doing on that front.
Good. Thanks so much, Bill.
Plus, I like his appearance. He's got the right hair color.
We got the stash. We got the stash and the right.
Yeah,
hair
we got
color.
the stash. We got a lot in common. I just wasn't a great lacrosse player, but other than that,
you were a decent golfer.
Yeah, I was a decent golfer, but that was a long time ago. Well, thanks a lot. We'll see y'all next time. Get John's book. We told you, The Coaching Zone. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for being here. Thanks, John. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Enjoyed
Thanks,
it,
Rick
man.
and Bill. Thank you very much. See you later.
See you later. Thanks a lot, John. We really appreciate it, man.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome, John. Take care.